rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of Saint Joseph. It is Wholeness and Healing Monday, fighting to cultivate the health of the whole person, mind, body, and soul. Let's refresh just real quick on the three pillars that we hold up here. Number one is a vision of health. We want to understand what it truly is to be healthy in mind, body, and soul. Also, we want to understand the attacks against us and the ailments that afflict us. We want to understand the need for healing and strengthening. And then we want to be faithful on this pilgrimage to heaven that we are on, this earthly pilgrimage to our heavenly homeland, this journey to perfection, not of perfection, but to perfection. We ought to be advancing in the virtues and in ongoing conversion, ongoing formation. And so we want to continue to cultivate the health of the whole person, mind, body, and soul for us and for those who are entrusted to our care. Always here with our co-host, my lovely wife, Becky Havens. She's a Catholic wife and mother with a passion and calling to educate people about the importance of caring for our bodies that the Lord has blessed us with by living a healthy lifestyle. She's the author of Toxin Free in 12 Months, a 12-month guide to help you transition over to a toxin-free lifestyle. Also wrote a boycott list of over 300 pro-abortion companies. You can get those resources for free and much more at her website, safehavensmama.com. That's safehavensmama.com. Our topic today, a very interesting one, and I think one that you're going to find very helpful as well, pelvic floor health. Pelvic floor health. We're going to get into what that actually means in just a moment, and we've got a special guest coming up with us today. But real quick, we want to always make sure that you know we're not doctors, we're not scientists, we're just regular people looking to live well and raise our family. We believe in objective truth and in asking questions when things do not make sense. We're not giving out medical advice, but we do want to offer a forum here today. We know a little bit, but there's still a ton we don't know. We do have personal experiences, and we know you do too. We love to hear from you. We're going to get the phone number out there in a bit, put out a survey already this morning to get some feedback, some questions from you. So all that coming up. And today's guest coming up in the next segment and throughout the show today, we've got Abby Inman with us. She's a Catholic wife, mother, and pelvic health physical therapist. So we're excited to get her in here today and dive into this topic. And one final disclaimer we ought to make today in the course of our conversation today. Anatomically correct language pertaining to the human body may come up in our discussions that perhaps some little ones have not yet had introduced to them. So just fair warning on that. And I can almost guarantee that this is not a topic that has ever been covered on Catholic radio before in this way, but why not? As Catholics, we're actually best equipped for these discussions. We can talk about topics like these, giving due reverence to the human body, respectfully seeking to understand with right reason the human body as God has designed it. So again, I guarantee that many of you listening are going to benefit greatly from our show today. So let's get to it. Becky, this is a topic that you came up with. You said, hey, we got to cover the pelvic floor here as a topic. And I'm thinking, I don't really know anything about what that is. First time I'm hearing of it. But I've learned a bit in the build up to the preparation of the show today. And fascinating stuff. But why did this stir in you? Why was this on your radar, this topic? Why this topic, pelvic floor health?
Well, it is a strange one to a degree to have on Catholic radio, but I think you explained it really well on why it is important. And I just really recently met Abby, and she kind of shared different things that she does. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And I think it's important, especially it's not just for men, but mainly for women to know of this, know a little bit more. It's something that I've learned a little bit about in my life, having 5 kids and kind of dealing with different things that nobody ever talks about. So you kind of don't really know what's going on or who you can talk to. It's very difficult to find Catholic doctors or Catholic therapists. So I think it's really important when we do meet great Catholic people in working in the world with these professions to bring them on and talk about it. So I'm excited to learn more. I don't know a ton. I know a little bit because of what I've experienced myself, but I'm excited to share what Abby's going to teach us today.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yes. And like I said, that morning survey that went out, we got some feedback there. If you want to get on that email list to get that morning survey every Monday, just go to thestationofthecross.com, go to the Simple Truth page there on the website, scroll down, you'll find a place to put your email address in, then you'll be able to participate in that survey. But even though we get some great feedback there, we can't read every survey response. We do our best to do so though, but the best way is to call in with your feedback. So phone lines are open now. If you have any questions or comments on this and you want to be first up to date, give us a call, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And so we actually didn't have very many people answer the survey today, a little bit lighter than usual. And I'll give my theory on why that is in just a moment. But the first question that we asked was, do you know what your pelvic floor is? And so everyone who did answer the survey did say that they did in fact know what their pelvic floor was, which leads me to believe the folks that just had, this was all new to them, the pelvic floor, I'm thinking they probably didn't click on the survey or make it past even the first question on this one today. But we got some great feedback though from those that did answer and say they knew what their pelvic floor was. And so we're going to get into that as the show goes on. But first, just a basic introduction here, Becky, on what the pelvic floor actually is. In my preparation leading up to this, I heard it described as basically a bowl of muscles, various muscles that are holding up our organs that have very important functions and are vital to our bodily health. Again, something I've never really thought of much before, but as you think about the anatomy and the way that God has designed the human body, it truly is amazing. All these little bits, all these little muscles, and the way that they all work to the way they're all supposed to work in a healthy body. And then the way that, it does mess things up if they aren't working properly, and how that can lead to various challenges and problems that then we want to be able to detect and figure out, okay, what needs to be done. And we're going to try to get into all that related to the pelvic floor today. But Becky, anything by way of introduction that you can share just on the basics here?
Yeah, that's kind of how I understood it as well. Basically, the muscles, when you have pelvic floor dysfunction, it's when the muscles in the pelvic area aren't working properly. And so there was a point for me personally, I think after I had, I don't know, probably maybe our third or our fourth, and I was really struggling with exercising and, having a lot of pain in my stomach. And I know that there's something called, I probably won't even pronounce this right, but it's like diastasis recti or something something that women have as they give birth. Their muscles start to separate from each other, and they leave this gap in the middle of your stomach. And so I was having that, and it's a strange thing, but I guess it's a common thing. And so kind of made me dig a little bit deeper into like the pelvic floor area. And a lot of strange things happen when you have babies. And so you start to wonder, like, I'm not functioning properly. This is not the same as it was before I had kids. So how can I help myself without having to get some invasive surgery? Because that's usually the next step that a doctor might say, well, we can do surgery and we can kind of lift everything up, or if things are coming down or whatever. And I did not want to take that route at all. So I found a physical therapist several years ago, probably similar to Abby, who she offered an online class and just very easy muscle exercises to do, like super easy actually, that I thought, how is this actually going to even help or do anything? And it was very successful because I was exercising and having major issues. And I'm like, this is not kind of what I want to happen for the rest of my life. I'm only in my late 30s. And so as I started to do her exercises, I felt a lot of healing in my abdominal area and pelvic floor area, and just like simple things to do that helped a ton, even when it comes to like pain, like lower back pain and pain in your muscles in your stomach, things that were not an issue before I had kids. So this is probably a topic for women, but women of all ages, because I'm sure that it continues on for your whole life if you're not fixing it. I'm sure it actually pertains to men as well. I'm sure Abby knows a few different ways that, men can improve this. But yeah, I think it's interesting because it's something probably nobody's talking about, especially from a Catholic perspective, because I'll tell you what, when I did go to look on different websites and you're looking, what is pelvic floor dysfunction, pelvic floor physical therapy, and it's just irritating as you go in to look, because they're talking, they're like, people born with this part, or the person designated to this part when they were born. They're not saying men or women. You can't even look at medical information anymore without somebody saying in the article, like, how they identify as, it's sex and gender is now two different things. And so if you try to look this up, it's frustrating, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, as the medical establishment continues to go woke and lose their minds into depravity, we're going to hold the line here when it comes to natural law and objective truth and right reason. And so, yeah, of course, the biological sex and gender, these are not two different things, right? A male is a male, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. We can go down to the chromosomal level and understand this. And so anyway, we're going to get to the truth of things today when it comes to a healthy pelvic floor with our expert guest. When we get back, Abby Inman is going to be with us. And we're going to get into the nature and the importance of a healthy pelvic floor. What are some common problems relating to the pelvic floor? What can be done to improve pelvic floor health? All this coming up and more. Stay tuned.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
We hear all the time from listeners who discovered the station by seeing a Try God bumper magnet in traffic. You can request a free bumper magnet and start evangelizing just by driving around town. Go to thestationofthecross.com and click on promotional material under the About tab. There you can request a magnet for your listening area. We even have one for the iCatholic Radio mobile app. Request yours today.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network is dedicated to answering the critical need of access to quality, consistent, professional, and proven Catholic programming. We cannot rely on other media outlets to properly represent our Church. Catholic Radio reaches Catholics, non-Catholic Christians, and non-believers alike. As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent of your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim and Becky Havens here. Our topic today, pelvic floor health. And we want to introduce now today's expert guest coming on with us here today. It is Abby Inman. She is a Catholic wife and mother, a pelvic health physical therapist. Abby believes the support from a physical therapist during pregnancy and postpartum should be a standard of care and is working towards making this universal. Pregnancy and postpartum physical therapy is near and dear to her heart, and she recently had her fourth baby. She teaches a childbirth education class, Labor Like a Rock Star. She is an author, blogger, and she will also be taking birth support doula clients in 2024. Her website where you can connect with her, FromAbbeyWithLove.com. That's FromAbbeyWithLove.com. Abby, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited. I'm well.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. Thanks for being here. And so in the survey that we put out, we asked people, is your pelvic floor healthy and functioning properly? And how do you know? These are some of the responses we got, which kind of represents the range that we had here in the feedback. One said, it wasn't healthy, but I am making progress in getting it functioning properly again. Didn't give much more detail on that. Another said, as a postmenopausal woman, I think it could use some assistance. Another said, I have no idea. This is not something I think about. So that's kind of the range. But can you share with us, just by way of introduction, about the nature and importance of a healthy pelvic floor?
Well, so I think those responses really just kind of nail it down, because the pelvic floor is sort of this mysterious place that should just function automatically. So we really aren't meant to think about it. So, the person who responded that, like I said, was totally on point. But again, like Becky said, especially for women, there are certain time points in life where pelvic floor health could become a thing that you do start to think about. And usually it unfortunately can lead to pretty serious quality of life impairments, because you went from not thinking about it at all to now these things are happening to me likely every day or every time I try to work out or, something like that. So like you said, too, Jim, when you were describing what the muscles are, they perform very important functions like our ability to use the bathroom and, hold up our organs, which also means for women to carry a baby. So again, there are just some predictable ways where things and time points where things can sort of go wrong. And that's why I think just having PTs like me as kind of on the team is really important to potentially help prevent any of that stuff from going wrong, but also just to deal with it as it might come up.
Terrific. Abby Inman is with us, pelvic health physical therapist from AbbeyWithLove.com. Becky, let's get you in here. What questions do you have for Abby today?
Okay, so we'll just do some basic things. What would be symptoms? How would you know? I mean, I knew only because strange things were happening. I think I Googled it. I was 6 months postpartum, and that's what popped up. And I was like, wow, there's something I can do about this. But how would somebody even know that they're dealing with that?
Yeah. So kind of the classic symptom for pelvic health in general, not necessarily related to pregnancy and postpartum, although it definitely can be, is it called incontinence, or, the inability to be able to control urine or bowel movements, but urine is more common. So that just means you're leaking a little bit of urine at some time point. So a lot of times it's when you cough, laugh, or sneeze, or potentially while you're exercising. And, most of the time people don't want that to happen, and it shouldn't happen. And a lot of women, again, whether it's newly postpartum or within the first year or even 5 years or 10 years, after having kids, you might hear from your health professionals or your friends that it's happening to them too. So you might start to get this sense that it's normal, but it's, there's sort of a saying in pelvic health that it might be common, but it's not normal. It doesn't mean that your body is functioning optimally when that is happening. Some other symptoms, definitely specifically to pregnancy and postpartum were diastasis recti that you mentioned, and you totally said it right. It's diastasis or diastasis. It doesn't really matter. And that is the separation of the abdominal muscles, which again is normal in, the last few weeks of pregnancy, because that is just a change that the body has to make to accommodate the growing baby. But some of that, like lack of tension in the abdominal wall, can persist postpartum, and that can relate to things like back pain postpartum or hip pain, or again, it's just sort of a sign that your body is not fully healed and recovered from the process of being pregnant. And so, having a diastasis, like I said, is not necessarily painful, but it typically leads to, again, dysfunction elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. When we're talking about the common problems relating to the pelvic floor, how can we understand this broadly? Like, I'm trying to think of the way that I heard somebody explain this in my preparation here was that sometimes these muscles could be too constricted, too tight, and they need to somehow find a way to relax them more. Sometimes they can be too relaxed, and they need to find a way to tighten them. But also, I guess they could be, it seems like what Becky seems to be talking about, if I'm understanding it correctly, kind of like misplaced or displaced, or maybe, these muscles could be pulled in some way. I don't know, broadly trying to think about this. What are the general ailments, the things that really prevent this pelvic floor from operating as it ought to be? And how can we just understand the problems?
Well, so really all muscles, the pelvic floor muscles included, function best in, kind of a sweet spot of what we call tension. So, when you pull any other muscle, a quadriceps or a hamstring, right? It means that you have extended the muscle beyond sort of this sweet spot of tension. And, another common analogy that I'll use related to some other muscles is like if you have tension in your neck and shoulders, and you are actually, like, your shoulders are, raised up closer to your ears because those muscles in your neck are so tense. That could be an example where now you have too much tension and you need those to relax, right? So really, like you said, those are the same scenarios with the pelvic floor. It is just describing the pelvic floor is not working optimally in its, ideal range of tension. So sometimes, or I guess I would say most commonly in the situations where the pelvic floor is too tense, that typically results in things like pain. So it could be pelvic pain, potentially pain with urinating or pain with intercourse, or it could present as hip pain or low back pain or something like that. Or sometimes it also can present sort of like the symptoms of a UTI, urgency to go to the bathroom, where you just always feel like you have that urge to pee. Or potentially, like I said, even some burning or again, discomfort while you're urinating, versus pelvic floor when it is not contracting well. Again, that could also result in some incontinence typically. And so again, really either of those can happen related to pregnancy and postpartum. It just kind of depends on where the person sort of was starting before she got pregnant. Sometimes like young athletes or collegiate athletes tend to have tense pelvic floors. And then when they get pregnant, the pregnancy sort of exaggerates that even further, because that's where their muscles are like used to being. And so then they become symptomatic, or
Great.
worse, symptomatic or have worse symptoms. So yeah, like I said, even though the pelvic floor muscles are kind of this like mystery, and lots of people don't like to talk about the dysfunction that happens from them, they still function just like all of the other muscles in the body. Like I said, sort of have this sweet spot of tension. What I was talking about before, though, is that they are sort of special in this way that they are meant to function automatically in our everyday lives. And so that's sort of like the beating of your heart, right? You don't ever think about, heart beat, right? That just happens, by itself. And so that's really how the pelvic floor functions too, when there isn't anything going wrong. The reason I have a job is because we can, the pelvic floor muscles are just like your bicep muscle also, where I can think about, okay, now I'm going to contract my bicep muscle. I'm going to do a bicep curl. So once you learn how to control the pelvic floor muscles, that's when you can do something about what might be going wrong with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're about to hit a hard break here, but just real quick, Abby, so pregnancy plays a factor in this. I'm guessing age is an important factor in this. Any other important factors?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Surgery, potentially. Or again, it really could be like a sports injury or, a recreational injury, potentially to a hip or to the back. Really, the pelvic floor is part of the core. So anything that might cause core dysfunction could also potentially cause pelvic floor dysfunction.
Okay. All right. Very good. Yeah, we're going to hit this break soon. I know we're going to hear that music any moment now, but I guess I'll sneak in one more quick one, and that would be that if somebody starts to experience these symptoms, would they just go see their primary care? Would they go to the ER? Would they just right away try to say, hey, I need to see a pelvic health physical therapist? What's the first thing they do?
That's a great question. Should I answer it when we come back?
Sure. Yeah. We'll have you answer it as soon as we get back. And I know Becky has got a bunch of questions too. We're going to get Becky back in here, but we also want to get you in here. Any questions, comments that you have today on this topic of pelvic floor health, give us a call, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. So already from what we've heard from Abby, very valuable content, and it kind of begs the question, okay, what do we do if these muscles need to be more relaxed? What's the protocol for that? What if they need to be strengthened in some way, tightened up a bit? What's the protocol for that? So there's a lot to get to here, and we're going to get to it when we get back. Stay tuned.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. Relying on questionable data, legacy media are trumpeting the claim that abortions are up after the Dobbs decision and the end of Roe. Pro-life statistical researcher Dr. Michael New has a response. He says it's pointless to trust voluntary samples from abortion businesses. And in the resulting state estimates, there are some embarrassingly sloppy guesses. Noting that pro-life laws are doing a great deal of good, Dr. New points to other stats, some from even abortion-friendly groups, that admit strong declines in abortion numbers outpacing blue state increases. Perhaps in first place, Texas shows only 17 abortions this year. Abortion advocates introduced the Reproductive Health Act Wednesday in the Michigan State House. It removes all licensing requirements for abortion businesses, abortion waiting periods, and reporting, and allows medical abandonment of abortion survivors. This is Life News Radio. News at Life News Radio should make you think, and often it should make you think about calling your elected officials in Washington, D.C. So remember this phone number, 202-224-3121. Let your senators, your representatives, hear from you. 202-224-3121. The Abortion Survivors Network claims there are 85,000 U.S. abortion survivors. Besides offering help, they are promoting efforts in the U.S. House to pass the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
Details are at lifenews.com. And finally, a reminder from Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta, whose feast day, the anniversary of her death, was this past week. 3 years before she died, she told the National Prayer Breakfast in D.C., the greatest destroyer of peace is abortion. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim and Becky Havens here with our guest today, Abby Inman. She is a pelvic health physical therapist. From AbbyWithLove.com is her website. Again, from AbbyWithLove.com. Talking about pelvic health, pelvic floor health today. And so we left off with Abby this question of what happens if somebody starts to experience the incontinence that you explained in the last segment, or some sort of pain in their core or in their pelvic area where they're like, this is a muscular pain that's going on here. Where do I go with this? Or maybe in pregnancy, after pregnancy, something with in that regard. Where do they go? Do they go to the hospital? Do they go to their doctor? Do they find a pelvic health physical therapist? Where does one begin?
So yeah, a lot of people, if you are not aware that such a thing, that pelvic floor physical therapy exists, likely would go to their primary care provider, which is obviously a great place to start. Unfortunately, like your listeners, it may also be true that the primary care provider doesn't know that pelvic floor therapy exists, which is really a problem for my profession, but is something that we are working on. In all states, there are just different stipulations to this, but in all states, there is something called direct access physical therapy, which means that you can see a physical therapist without a physician referral. Like I said, there are different stipulations to things, but in Wisconsin, where I am, there aren't too many, hoops to jump through for me. So a lot of times, people can sort of skip the step of going to see their physician, primary care or OB, or urologist or something like that, and just start with coming to see a pelvic PT. Part of the reason for that is that all physical therapists graduating from PT programs now are actually doctors themselves. So I have a clinical doctorate in physical therapy, so that gives me my letters are DPT. So that's part of the reason, and really it's my opinion that for physical therapy to sort of advance as a profession, that we likely sort of will become primary care providers in some sense. And this is one of them. That really, like I said, to sort of cut out the middleman of going to a provider who potentially cannot offer you the best treatment, and is going to refer you to physical therapy anyway. You can just seek that care from the start, because it is a muscular issue. Really, again, I would argue that pregnancy is a, musculoskeletal issue, which again is why I think that care in this way should be a standard. I always say that, like, you can have the absolute best OB, best midwife, best obstetric physician assistant. You can have a great relationship with that person, but it's just not their job to take care of you in the same way that I can take care of you. They're just not looking at the things that I look at. So that's why it really is just sort of this like black hole, I think, in healthcare.
Abby Inman is with us, Catholic wife, mother, and pelvic health physical therapist from AbbyWithLove.com. Becky, let's get you back in here. Why don't you go with a couple questions here for Abby? I promise I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to butt in. You go ahead and take the floor with Abby for a while.
No, you're doing great. No, I also want to just get the men in here as well. I know we have a lot of male listeners, and I've heard there is a connection between pelvic floor dysfunction and the prostate. And I know when you hear, anything prostate related with men, you think prostate cancer. A lot of people don't even know what the prostate is. So kind of going towards the direction of men for a little bit. I know they have obviously different organs than we do, and is that directly related, like your pelvic floor function to your, if you have a strong one, you have a strong prostate. If you have a weak one, a weak prostate, does that make any sense? How would it, like, does that connect in any way?
Potentially, but not exactly. Like if you have a strong pelvic floor, you have a strong prostate. The prostate is a gland that, performs functions for male pelvic health. And so all of the organs sit above or on top of the pelvic floor in both men and women. And so the prostate is in that same spot in men. The most common time I will see a male patient is likely related to something going on with the prostate, or like you said, with prostate cancer. So one of the most common treatments for prostate cancer is to have a prostatectomy or surgery to remove the prostate. And that surgery has really come a long way in, I don't know, probably the last decade now, where they do it robotically, and the recovery time is so much less than it used to be when what was called an open prostatectomy was standard. But typically a large portion of men who undergo that surgery will have some incontinence afterward. Again, for them, strengthening the pelvic floor and making sure that, again, their core is functioning optimally, just allows them to get back to, their lives quicker in that recovery time from that surgery. So I've had men who are like, well, yeah, I'm going to have this surgery in January, and can I be on the golf course by May or June? And I'm like, well, absolutely. As long as you do what I tell you to do.
Exactly. No, and that's what you're there for. That's good. That's really interesting. So I would say, okay, so there is the ongoing running joke of the woman. I've seen memes of these. The woman is the older woman. She's running, and she's like laughing, saying, "I just peed my pants," or something like that, and that's like the common thing. Like women get old and they're just gonna pee their pants, and it's like, okay, that's a strange thing to say, but that's a very common thing. I think that happens for women. So you come in, and your job is to help strengthen that, so that ideally this is no longer an issue. Now, somebody comes to you, is this an ongoing process? Like you say, the man wants to go play golf. Is he going, he's doing the exercises forever and he's good to go, or he's, working? Is this like how you like strengthen up you want to get big biceps? Does it work the same type of way?
It can. So, typically after an event like surgery or a birth, there's more healing to do as part of that recovery. And, pelvic floor therapy can just be one component to that. In the case of someone who is maybe, perimenopausal or postmenopausal, and this has been happening for a long time, and they are just now learning that there's something to do to potentially help it, that it will likely be a shorter bout of care or of rehab. It still could be, 3 to 4 to 6 months, but if you do that well, And, again, are working with someone who is skilled in specifically helping with these issues. It's really not like you will have to do it for the rest of your life. It's more of like you learn these things, you go through the process and, strengthen or balance these aspects of the core and the hips and the back and the abs. And then, once that change has made, there might be some maintenance exercises and things to be doing, but those are likely things that you just would be doing anyway. Becky, you mentioned earlier that you actually thought the exercises were, not like super strenuous or like crazy challenging. And I would agree with that. Like they're really just the things that you would have to continue to do would just be things that are going to keep your core strong, keep your hips strong. Walking, is a great pelvic floor exercise. But again, like the problem comes in is like, if you can't control your bladder and go for a walk, you're obviously probably not going to want to walk all that often. So that's really, again, a shorter course of, of specific rehab in that instance would be warranted.
All right. I got to hop back in. I know I said I was going to butt out for a while, but I got something I got to get to. Two things, actually. One is I want to get this number out here one last time and let people know that you can still call in and still be anonymous on this. So if that's an issue, you want to get a question answered or make a comment, but you also want to remain anonymous, that's fine. You can call in. You don't have to come on the air. Just let the call screener know what your question or your comment is, and we can get it in that way. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And then I've got a follow-up question to what you were just talking about. So I thought that what you had explained earlier was that leakage was a symptom that would come from the muscles being too constricted or too tightened, or however you would, the tension would be too much. Versus, I think what Becky was talking about, also saying leakage, but also that's a symptom also of them being maybe not strong enough. So that seems to be on both ends that seems to present itself. And so we heard a little bit about the exercises to strengthen. What about if there's some tension that we need more relaxation in these muscles? What does the protocol look like for that?
The first thing to start with is typically a lot of breathing. Again, this might sound crazy, but somewhere along the line, again, whether it's related to being pregnant or just, I don't know, changing one's own habits, stress, I don't know, we sort of forget how to breathe correctly, in that we don't use our diaphragms as much. And sometimes that can be a really easy fix for people, that they start to breathe better and we get their rib cages moving better. That honestly by itself could improve pelvic floor symptoms, because really the diaphragm and the pelvic floor muscles are, in their shape, they're sort of opposites of each other. Jim, you had described them initially as a bowl, and that is a good description. The diaphragm is sort of like an upside down bowl at the bottom of the rib cage. So they're sort of like mirrors. And they work very closely together in that automatic function. And so every time you take a breath, your diaphragm moves, or it should, and your pelvic floor should move, kind of in sync. So often people who have a lot of tension in their pelvic floors also have tension that is causing them not to breathe in a full sense, or again, to use the diaphragm appropriately.
All right, excellent. Yes, Abby Inman is with us. She is not just a Catholic wife and mother, but also a pelvic health physical therapist. And she's helping us out on this topic today, pelvic floor health. If you want to get your comment or question in, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. I know Becky has some follow-ups, and also we do have some questions, comments here that we want to get in from you, our listeners, in this final segment. So a lot to pack in the final segment, all coming up soon. And if you want to connect with Abby, you can go to her website. You can learn more there. Connect with her from abbywithlove.com. That's from abbywithlove.com. And one more segment to go. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for September 11th. Today we celebrate Saint Cyprian. Change and upheaval swirled around this 3rd century bishop who died a martyr. Cyprian lived at a time when persecution of the church was at a high point. In response, many Christians acted out of fear and lapsed in the practice of their faith by sacrificing to idols. In an effort to protect their lives, others claimed that they had done so. How and whether to reinstate those Christians became the burning question of the day. It caused great controversies, but also helped the church progress in its understanding of the sacrament of penance. Cyprian took a middle course. He proposed that those who had actually sacrificed to idols should receive the Eucharist only at death. As for those who had only claimed they had sacrificed, he recommended that they could return to the church after a period of penance. Because of his stance on how to handle heretics and schismatics, Cyprian fell out of favor with Pope Stephen I. The Bishop of Carthage was exiled by the emperor, but he refused to leave his city, insisting that the people should have the witness of his martyrdom. He died in 258. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
The Catholic Current, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ.
St. Jerome said ignorance of scriptures is ignorance of Christ. And again, that's not news to you. I'm sure you've known that for decades. But how did the writing of this book confirm what St. Jerome said?
Yeah, I'm glad we have a couple hours to talk about that.
Well, sure. Yeah, use both sides of the paper if necessary, yeah.
The Catholic Current, 5 p.m. Eastern, from the Station of the Cross and on the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim and Becky Havens here with our guest today, Abby Inman. She's a pelvic health physical therapist from abbywithlove.com. Final segment. Here we go. Becky, what question do you have for Abby?
Yes, so I probably have too many questions, so I'll just narrow it down. But as you were just saying, I'm assuming that when you say your diaphragm and all that's related, I'm assuming that it also has to do with your posture, because I remember looking into this, and, you know, women are notoriously, like, if they're breastfeeding, they're hunched over. If they're doing chores, they're hunched over, and everything kind of shrinks. And when I was learning a little bit more, I was taught to elongate your midsection and spread it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Because you're crunching everything, you're pushing it down. And actually I did that, and it was helpful. So the breathing thing, it's not some weird thing. It's just part of natural everyday life, breathing, you know, through your diaphragm. That was actually a really helpful thing for me. So that's kind of like a half a question, but I know there's so much more to get through. But I also really want to see if you want to touch on really quickly if there's any connection to your pelvic floor and infertility, if that is an issue there for maybe some of the women listening who are struggling to get pregnant or keep a pregnancy in that way.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Everything about posture affects all of the muscles attached to the spine. So, you know, again, what I was saying before is that no other healthcare provider is looking at how you move in your everyday life or how you're moving in your pregnancy. And so that's my job. And then, you know, we fix or try to fix whatever we find or try to improve whatever we find. You know, so that's why having somebody look at you in that way is important. Related to the infertility, the answer is potentially. You know, so I like to say that all physical therapists are experts in movement. So, you know, what has to happen in order to get pregnant? Well, the activity itself, intercourse is movement, but also just the like ability for our organs to function appropriately and do what they are supposed to do to conceive a baby. There are some physical therapists and some pelvic floor physical therapists who are trained in what's called visceral mobilization. And so that visceral just means organs. So that there are definitely some techniques to make sure that like your uterus is moving well and in the right place per se, and that your ovaries are moving well and there isn't any scar tissue or adhesions that could be affecting their function. Sometimes women who have diagnoses like PCOS or have ovarian cysts can have some scar tissue built up there, or really if they've just had any abdominal surgeries or previous C-sections. There's so much that again, a pelvic floor therapist or someone trained specifically for pregnancy and postpartum can help in that area.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that. All right. We do have a one comment and one question from the audience that came in. Here's the comment. It says here that in looking for exercises on Instagram, a woman popped in my feed that also does this for a living, and she provides great info with exercises and the importance of how to breathe during exercises to strengthen your pelvic floor. It has been a game changer for me and has pretty much healed my leaking. After 3 kids, this was an issue for me. And then we have a pretty specific question here, and an important one. It reads as follows. I have read that using a dilator is a useful tool for older women to use to keep tissues and blood flow and pelvic floor healthy, but I fear that doing so would be sexual sin. Would implementing that sort of intervention tool be considered masturbation? I want comfortable intimacy with my husband, but I do not want to commit mortal sin or commit sin, is what she's saying here. So that's a very important question. Obviously, looking to alleviate the physical difficulties, challenges that are there, but at the same time, of course, doesn't want to do anything to fall into sin, commit sin. So I'm unfamiliar with that. What a dilator is. Abby, can you shed some light on this?
Yeah, for sure. It's honestly, that's a great question. And one that just speaks to like why working with a Catholic, provider, obviously, or a Catholic PT to help you through this, because not any PT could answer this question for you. But so the answer is I've consulted with some priests about this, and the answer is that it's not mortal sin. Depending on, again, what you're using it for. Under the instruction of a healthcare provider, like myself, who is, giving you direction very specifically about what to do with that medical tool, it can be very effective to, alleviate pain with intercourse, to allow you to, be able to fulfill that, marital relationship. Most of the time, dilators are actually not stimulating. So, most of the tools that the secular world uses for masturbation have a specific stimulating feature, and dilators that pelvic floor PTs use do not have that. So they're different in that way. And again, I usually describe this to my patients as that this is a medical tool. Honestly, it's similar to a device that's called a Theracane, or like a foam roller, really, right? Like that is a tool that you would use to massage your muscles in other places of your body. And that's really what a dilator does. It's just that you have to put the dilator inside of you to reach those muscles.
All right, very
Hopefully
good. Important distinctions.
Answer.
Important distinctions here with Abby Inman. Yes, very good. And again, the website from abbywithlove.com. Becky, we've got time for you to sneak another question in. Go ahead.
Leave it up to me after that one. I know it's a very uncomfortable thing. I can't say I know much about that at all. I've heard the word, and I've heard there's medical uses for that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I know that a lot of women don't want to talk about stuff like that. Pain with sexual intercourse, and especially after childbirth, and especially related to, issues with your pelvic floor or the organs falling down. I know I had a friend who had immediate surgery after birth to, bring up, I think her bladder was literally falling out because of the birth. So is surgery ever an option for this? I mean, do you know the difference? If you're really struggling, if there's something major, you're signing up for surgery, or is there a lot that you can do with just the exercise that you would provide?
Yeah, I mean, I think I work very closely with the surgeons who would perform that type of surgery. In women, they're called urogynecologists, so they have additional training specifically to do those surgeries. But the thing is I think trying pelvic PT first before just going through surgery is it's a less expensive option. It's obviously less invasive, and it's, there's really no risk. So even if you potentially failed pelvic floor therapy, you could always choose to have surgery afterward. And potentially get you back to that quality of life that you're looking for. But for a portion of people, surgery may not be necessarily, the commenter that Jim just read the statement from.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today, Abby Inman. She's a pelvic health physical therapist. You can connect with her at the website FromAbbyWithLove.com. You can also connect with Becky if you wish at her website, safehavensmama.com. If you want to write to me about the show, feel free, Jim H at thestationofthecross.com. God bless you.